Guys, got another video for you. We have a 2014 Audi S4 with the V6 supercharged, and on this one we're going to be replacing pretty much all the front suspension components and installing Koni adjustable struts and shocks on here in the front and rear. That's the whole box of mile parts there. And we got some 034 springs, Koni struts there. Then we got some shocks back there, a bunch of mounts. So we're going to be making a little video on how to do that. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that try to do this themselves, and there's not a lot of information on these things. So the first thing I did was I took off the wheels. Obviously, this is going to be the first thing. Next thing you want to do is you're going to want to, before you even start on anything, this is a 14, so it shouldn't be too hard, but you want to spray this down with some kind of rust penetrant, PB Blaster, WD-40 something, because this thing is, generally speaking, very hard to get off. The other issue is the pinch bolt. As you can see, there's not a lot of rust around here. This one should come out pretty easily. I've had a lot of them where I have to sit here and put a torch on it for 30 minutes just to get the bolt out, and it, comes out in pieces sometimes. But this one shouldn't be too terribly bad. But there's the strut there and the housing and everything. So basically, all this stuff is going to be taken out. So, all right, I'm gonna start with this driver's side. I guess I'll start with pulling the strut out first, I suppose, and just start yanking this stuff out, man, and I'll show every little step that I can. So let's get started. Okay, so we ran into our first problem. This will probably happen to you. It seems to happen almost every one of these things, unfortunately. But the nut won't come off with impact, and this thing is pretty powerful. So if you can't get it off with your impact, then the next thing to do is you probably have it lifted off the ground, and you're like, oh crap, I'm going to put the wheels back on. No, you don't. Just put your two lug studs on there and then angle it on the caliper, just like that. Put your jack handle on there or something, right? And boom, get it loose, just like that. And there, now it's loose. Alright, so I took off the other side, but I gotta show you this real quick. Alright, to get to the strut top bolts, here's one here, and there's, I think, one or two hidden underneath there. So you got to spin these little guys off right here, right? Just like that. Oop. And then this whole cover should come off pretty easily. Just like this side's a little bit more tricky because of the ECM and washer, bottle, and all that stuff right in your way. But there's a little nut right here that holds this guy on right there. So you'll take that off and just kind of move it out of the way. You don't have to take it out all the way, but you need to at least move it till you can get to that bolt that's right there. You need to get to that one. You also need to get to this one that's right there next to the harness. You can barely see it. Now you don't have to remove the harness or anything. Just get you a nice swivel socket and just kind of push it off to the side and zip it out. You don't have to take it out all the way if you don't want to. You can actually just leave it there. Alright, so we got the pinch bolt out. It's always a good idea to replace these. As you can see, this one is bent. It's got a nice bend right there at the end of it. So it was a little bit challenging to get it out. Usually what I do is I just take a wrench and put it just like this, as I take a power tool and just spin it off while I'm holding the wrench and pushing out at the same time. That usually takes it out pretty easily. And for the next thing, so basically these don't just come out of there, you're gonna have to do a little something. And what I do is I take a big flathead screwdriver and I put it in between that gap right there. And then you can hammer it a little bit. Be careful not to hammer too far and get the aluminum shaved off and then covering your hole. You're gonna have a big problem if you do that. So just be careful when you get in here. Just hammer it in kind of lightly. I gotta note something here. This was actually a 15 millimeter back here, which is a little bit odd, but I have seen them 14 millimeters sometimes, 15 and 16. So just keep that in mind. Might be a 14, might be a 15, might be a 16. Just depends on your application, I suppose. But anyway, so now that we've got those loose, we can start trying to push out these control arms off the top. Boom, pops right off once you get the control arm loose. and get this thing hammered in here off and pull the spindle forward. But before we pull the spindle forward, we want to try to take off all these wires that are here, like the speed sensor right here. We'll take this guy off right here. The brake line's right here. You'll just push that off of its little spot right there. Okay, just push it up. The other thing is this little speed sensor, or brake pad sensor, right from a damn flashlight. No, of course not. Switch on. Okay, so as you can see here, there's a little brake wear sensor right here. And what you do is you take a pick in between here, and there's a little tab there. So you got to push it off and then spin it out. So once you push it, you'll just spin it back this direction towards yourself, and it'll come right off of there and come out of its little bracket. So then you can separate that away from the spindle. Alright, so let's do that. Alright, so this is how it should look once you get everything off of here. Here goes the brake wear sensor connector, the speed sensor connector, and brake line is off of its little spot right here. So it's all nice and loose now. Control arms are up and loose. So the next thing I'm going to do, sorry about this, my camera keeps shutting off. But anyway, I'm going to take off this, I think it's a 16 millimeter, it's on this sway bar end link. So you'll take that off, okay? And then you're going to take this bolt out down here, and then you're going to take that bolt out. And once you do that, this little fork right here will drop down and you can pull it out of the way. It'll make it way easier to pull the strut out with this off of it than with it on. If you have it on here, you're going to have to, it goes without saying, you're going to have a hard time. So anyway, take that off. So that's what we're going to do now, and then we're going to take the whole thing out. So let's get started. Alright, let's get this flashlight on here. Okay, so did what I said I was going to do. Take off the sway bar bolt, which is 16 millimeter. Take off the fork, which is an 18 millimeter with an 18 millimeter nut on the back side of it. And then this bolt down here, which connects to the control arm, fork to the strut, 18 millimeter as well on the front, and 18 millimeter nut on the other side. So now as you can see, my strut is completely free here. So whenever it drops down, look at how much space I have to work with. I have that much space to work with versus like that much space. So now I'm gonna go up here and take those four 16 millimeter bolts out. This is the one I talked about earlier. 1, 2, 3 right there. And the fourth one hidden down there. So, all right, I'll get to that now. All right, so we've got this bolt out right there underneath the washer, and then that bolt right there is completely all the way up. I'm just leaving it in the place because it's right next to the harness and it's kind of a bitch to pull it out, so you can leave it there. Now just take out this last bolt. Leave the easiest one to access last, just because it's easy. All right, so there it goes. Got that loose in here. It's a little bit stuck. There's the whole thing right there. Easy peasy. So next thing I'm going to be doing is changing the strut. So I'm going to take this strut off completely, change the bump stop. Actually, I don't need to change the bump stop. It's perfect condition. So, alright, good. So we're going to change the mount, strut, put the 034 lowering spring on there, change the control arms, and then put it back together. Before I put it back in, I'll probably go ahead and take these control arms off, just because it's way easier with that out of my way. One thing to note on these control arms, let's see, I'll get my flashlight on. If you look right here, that bolt is not going to come out unless you drop the rack and pinion. There's no way around it. You have to take the bolts off. Once you take the lower cover off, you can get to the bolts for the rack and pinion. I think it's two big, like 22 or 24 millimeter bolts that hold it on there, and then you can just slide it down and pull that bolt out, or you can push it up, you know, whatever, however you find it necessary to do that. But that is one problem. It's kind of an aggravation. The other one is this one right here. We're gonna have to push back that heat shield right there, because there's no way to access the bolts to remove it all the way. I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is where it's at down there. That's it. So that's the cover right there, that one that's shiny. And absolutely impossible to get to. Unless you have the engine out of this thing, dude, you're never gonna get that thing out. So there's only leaves one option, and that is to just kind of bend it out of the way. Just enough to get the bolt out. And then try to push it back once you're done. That's literally the only way to do that, unless you pull the engine out and remove that cover and then never put it back in. Because once you put it back in, you're gonna have the same problem again. So, all right. I'm gonna go ahead and start changing the strut out first. And then after I get done with that completely, I'll go to the control arms next. All right. Okay. Just a side note on this, compressing the spring. More than likely, you're going to be using these shitty ass strut spring compressors. I have a better one. I just can't find it. I think it's at my shop, but it's like shaped like this. It's like big U's that they shit, and there's like 3 different sizes you can do. It's like universal for every strut, but basically it's like a fork that goes over the top there and a fork that goes over the top there with a long cylinder on the side that you just screw up and it squeezes it down like that. So much less sketchy than what I'm doing here. But anyway, you're gonna run into this problem if you're using those. As you can see, I got just a very small amount of clearance right here. What's gonna happen is you're gonna go to connect these on these springs and start tightening it up, and what's gonna happen is this bolt's gonna come out the end, it's gonna start hitting the hat here, and you're never gonna get it apart. Well, you may get it apart, but trying to put it back together, entirely different story. So as you can see now, it's completely loose. Like the hat, the mount is pretty separated from the hat itself, or from the mounting plate, whatever you want to call it. So now I can start disassembling it. But I had to put these, just like some random tubing that I had around that I had to cut to a certain length so it would stop this from coming out so far. And that fixed my problem. So just a side note, you might have to do the same thing because I'm more than likely going to be using these shitty tools. So, all right, so we got that. I'm gonna go ahead and zip off the nut here and start changing it around. All right, so we got the nut out for the top here, right there. Something else I wanted to note is if you're changing this out, there's a way that you can avoid a particular problem. Because whenever you go to loosen this, the whole strut, like hydraulic piston here, will start spinning with the nut, and you're gonna be like, damn, how am I gonna get it off? So basically what you could do is you can grab a pair of big pliers like this. This is only if you're changing the strut out. Because if you do this and you scar that metal, when it goes back down into its seat, it'll mess up that seal and you'll have a leaking strut. So not good if you're if this is one that you're gonna reuse. But so you'll just grab it here with a pair of channel locks just like that, and then loosen it, it comes right off. So now we can take this mount off. Let's see here. Let's set this up right here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Alright, so there goes the mount. Make sure you take note of how this goes on here, okay? And also there's a little washer right here that you definitely don't want to lose. So, alright, now that we've got this separated, here's that little washer, very important. Put that over there. I'm putting new mounts on here anyway, so shouldn't be a problem. But so now that we've got that, we can start to take this off from there. So what I'm going to do, since I've got it on the bottom of this here, I'm going to loosen this. Just do this slowly, bit by bit. You gotta worry about it flying off in your face or anything. Alright, boom. Now we got that. Take this little pin out of there. Alright, now we got that. Put that off to the side. Push this little pin out. Alright, and there is the spring and the strut all by itself, completely uncompressed. So, I'm going to take that out of there, take this off of there, and then whenever you go to put this spring back on and together, this only sits a certain way. Ooh, that's got a hole in it. That's not nice. It should probably be replaced, but I don't have another one. Let's see if I have another in that box. I doubt it though. But anyway, so as you can see, this only sits on here one way, and if you put this on here wrong, you're gonna have noises for days, dude. So make sure you put that on the same way you took it apart. And there goes that. So now I'm gonna start putting this thing back together. Okay, so we've got this all pieced together for the most part. Said I wasn't going to change that, but I got the new one anyway, whatever. Just went ahead and put it on there. So same thing as before. This is obviously not the most ideal location to put these at, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So anyway, this plate is going to go back on here, but you see right here, that's where that spring is supposed to sit. Okay, so you need to make sure that that is sitting on there properly, or else you're gonna have noises. So let's just try to get this back there on here. Being real careful not to kill myself at the same time. Can't see where it's at. Flip this over. Really careful with this thing. Make sure I got it on there in the right spot. Just make sure you got it all lined up on here. And since of being in a hurry, I have to take it all apart again. That would be unfortunate. Okay, so right there. I think that's where it's supposed to go. Let's see here a little bit. Alright, so now that is sitting on its seat properly. I see you've got that washer there. Make sure you put that on there. It's very important. So now that we've got that on there, put the nut on and start tightening it down a little bit. Now we've got that on there. What size is this? Watch it change the size. Did they? Yes, they did. It's no longer an 18, it is now a 19. Again. It's gonna spin on you, that's okay. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna relieve the tension on this now that we've got that nut on there a pretty good ways. See, it's almost sitting flush. So that's good. So now what's happening is when you're trying to tighten it, the cylinder is trying to spin with you. So all you have to do is now remove the tension on the springs. That's what we're gonna do now. Alright, there's that one. There's that one. Alright. Put off to the side. And now you can get a better look at it. Okay. Might have to move it around a little bit. Just get it centered up on there real good. Okay, now you can see it's pretty centered all the way around. Now we're going to take that put on there. I need to start taking out the lower control arms. I'm going to put the new control arms on there. The left and the right one, I'm going to change those too before I put this back in. I'm going to go ahead and put those on here. It's so much easier to do it outside the car. So, alright, so there's that part. I'm going to start on the control arms next. Okay, so got the, I went ahead and took the caliper off and roped it up here to keep it from stretching out the brake line. It also makes this a lot easier to work with when you don't have the caliper on. Have a lot of movement here. But anyway, so this problem you're probably going to run into, there is I believe a 6mm Allen on the bottom of this. You can see right there. What happens is when you go to loosen this, if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, which is on the ground, If you have it in the air, this is not really an issue. You can just use an impact, it usually comes right off. But if you're having to use hand tools to get that off because you can't put your impact underneath it because there's not enough clearance, and then basically what you have to do is take a 21mm ratchet wrench or just a regular wrench and hold the nut still while you spin this, or vice versa. Spin the nut while you hold this still. I actually spun this and held the nut still while I did it. So the other thing is too, is sometimes these things are have like a liquidy grease that comes out of them. So if I was you, I'd just put the bolt back in just to avoid having this crap everywhere. It's not as much as it was. I cleaned it up a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of annoying. So you don't want to lose all the grease in your axle either, so try to keep that in there. So the next thing I'm going to go for is this challenging bolt right here. And what I did with the splash shield, I just took off a couple of the clips that were holding it on there, and then take a bungee cord, strap it to the back there, so that'll stay out of your way. Much easier to work with when you have that out of the way. So as you can see, there is not a lot of space to work with here at all. So we're gonna have to push this back as far as we can push it back, just so we can get this bolt out. Not an easy task, I will tell you. So I'm gonna do that now. So this is already loose. I'll do this one first. Once I get this one out, I'll put the new one in, connect it onto here, so then this will be sitting up again. Or I'll probably just go ahead and take both of them off and then put it all together at the same time. Doesn't really matter. But alright, let's get to it. Alright, so we've got the bolt out. Just left it sitting there so you can see how far you have to push this back. Just use something flat, and don't use the tip of the screwdriver, because you will cut holes all in this thing. It's not very thick. So you want to use like the handle of like your pry bar or something, or a rubber mallet of some sort, and then push that back. Because if you use the tip of the screwdriver, I said you're going to cut it to pieces, so don't do that. So now that we've got that bolt out, we can now pull out this control arm. Easier said than done, obviously. So get a pry bar. Try to pry this together. And there goes one control arm. Now, to be honest with you, I feel like this one's a little bit easier than the other one, just because of the fact that you have to drop the rack and pinion, which I really don't like doing at all. Just me personally. But let's see here, let's push that over there. Okay, got all this stuff secured and out of the way. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zip off this nut right here, and then I'm going to drop the rack and pinion. But first I gotta take this stupid plastic cover off. Golly, the stupidest thing ever, man. I hate these plastic covers all over everything. Grinds my gears, man. But anyway, take off the plastic cover, and then you can get access to the 22 or 24 millimeter bolts, I believe, that are holding the rack and pinion up onto the subframe. And yeah, so let's start doing that now. Alright, so got this stupid cover off. Yay! And there's like 30 bolts holding this damn thing on here, as usual. It's like every other German car. Alright, but anyway, so to get to these bolts, you're going to want to take off the sway bar. So there's a 13 millimeter and a 13 millimeter. Might even be a 14, pretty sure it's 13 though. But and this is, looks like a 19 or a 21. Yeah, something like that. And then these, so these two, that, and then these two. And then this will come down, and you can take those out. And keep in mind now, where these screw into, they're actually little inserts. Like this is one right here. You can kind of see it. It's just a little flat metal piece with threads on it. So whenever you take this bolt out, that shit is going to fall out. So make sure you don't lose that, because you will never get it back in if you don't. Another one right over there too. So, alright, let's start zipping that out, and I'll come back. Alright, here we go. So, these bolts are crazy long. Look at that. It's like the same as in my hand. So, alright, so that bolt is one of them that goes through there, and then that's the other one, and they are indeed a 19 millimeter. So, as you can see now, it's nice and loose. Well, it's kind of hard to show you when I'm shaking it all over the place, huh? But you can see there. And then what that does is, so since this side is down over here, the other side is up. So now I can pull that bolt all the way out, and then I'm gonna do the same thing the other side. Is just pull this one down and push that one back up, and I'll be able to pull that bolt out over there. So, but I'm dealing with this side right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and get that thing out of there, which is right there. See, now you can get it underneath the rack. Before it was right next to it. Impossible. So, all right, let's do that now. All right, let's put the light on. Okay, so we got the other one off. Took the nut off of the ball joint right here, which is a 21, and then just smack it a couple of good times around here, and it'll come right off. So that's off, and then you got the triple square bolt that goes to the subframe that holds this piece on, which is that bolt right there. And this is a what, triple square? I think it's a 10. Let me see here. No, it's a 12. Okay. 12 triple square for that bolt. So now all of the control arms are out, both uppers, both lowers, and the strut's been changed over there. So now we literally just have to put all the new components back here and zip it all back together and do the same thing on the other side. Fun. All right, so we've got everything put in here. CV axle's tight. The only thing that I haven't put in here yet is the sway bar end link, because it's much easier to replace the stuff on the other side with the whole sway bar loose. So I'm just going to leave it loose for now, and then once I'm done with everything, I'll put the last piece in, which is going to be the sway bar end link. So that'll be the last thing I do. But new control arm here, new control arm there, got the new strut, upper control arms, mounts, shock absorber, the little thing here. So yeah, this is gonna have the same kind of problems on the other side with this, and then maybe possibly the control arm bolts. It shouldn't be too hard on the other side, but it might be the same thing. But this process here that I showed you is the same thing that you're gonna do to the other side. So I'm not gonna record the passenger side. This was the driver's side. And then I'm gonna record one of the rears, doing the rear shock. So that's what I'll do next.